Welcome back to the Unikaksha. So in today's session, we'll try to explore the constraints of the database, that is SQL database. So we have already explored not null and unique constraint in our past video session. In today's video session, we are going to explore the concepts of primary key and foreign key. So what is a primary key? Primary key is nothing but a combination of not null and unique. So what is the basic purpose of having a primary key? So for example, if you are having a table, suppose a product. So you will be having all the different kinds of product, and if, in order to identify every product separately, every product will be supported with some ID associated with it, which is nothing but the primary key for that product. So that if you are aware about suppose say ID P10, so you can search into the register what P10 indicates, what's actual product it is, what are the product specifications, and so on. There is not going to be any other product that will be designated with the number 10 or ID 10. When you say that jam is my product P10, there won't be any other product that is sharing the ID that is P10. So that uniquely identifies the entire row. That's why it is called as a primary key. It's nothing but the one, what you can say, value using which you can easily identify the entire row very clearly. That's basically what we mean by the primary key. Sometimes it happens that we want to combine the information for some purpose from two or more tables, which is also called as joining the tables. So whenever you are joining the information, for example, in one table, I have the information of the employee. In another table, I have the information about the manager. Now, I want to combine the information of the employee table and the manager table. But while combining this information, I don't want any chaotic presence of the information into my result set. I want the proper information to be fetched from both the tables, and the result set should look proper. In such cases, we can use something called as the foreign key. So let us just check the concept of primary key and foreign key in SQL so that the things will be more clear or more understandable to us. So let's go back to our SQL, MySQL, in order to implement these things. So this is our MySQL window. Let me just expand this. We'll try to create a table, and for the first half, you can say for the session, we'll try to understand the importance of the primary key, and then we'll check what the foreign key is. So let us just try to implement the primary key concept over here. So I'm creating a table called as person with suppose say ID, first name, last name, age as the values, and we will assign primary key as the ID. So let's try creating this table. So first, we have to check the databases. We will use Unikaksha_1 database. We will create table, can call that table as a person, which will consist of ID, which is number, or you can say integer. Then we want person name, which is nothing but varchar of suppose say some 20 characters. And we'll have one more variable to which we'll call as person age. So I'll call it as ph. Again, it is going to be integer. And at last, I have to specify which variable I want to term as the primary. So I want to term primary key as suppose say ID. Then in this case, at the end, I will write here primary key. And I want primary key to be my ID. So this is basically how our table is created. So we have created the table called as person, ID having integer value, name having character value, age which is again integer, and we are keeping ID as a primary key. So far we have created this. Now whenever you are inserting the values, we can insert value something like this. Insert into person values. The first value is ID. I'm inserting it as integer 101. Second value is name. I inserted some random name. Then I have to insert the value for age. This is the value of age I have inserted. I will insert few more rows. Suppose I'm inserting 102. I will insert the value for age. Let me insert one more record. With the value of age, suppose say 24 here. Let us insert one more record. This time we will keep the ID 103. We'll keep the name, suppose say as Alexa, and the value of the age as 26. Let us try to run this, and now it is giving us an error that we are having duplicate entry for 103. So this is what I was trying to tell you, that when you create a primary key, it consists of benefits of both, that is not null as well as unique. So in this case, you cannot either keep your ID as vacant or as null. At the same time, you cannot keep the value of ID as a repeated value. So I have already used 103 in my previous query, and that's the reason why I cannot use 103 again for my next query or for my next record. So this is not absolutely allowed whenever you are creating the primary key. So I just hope you understood the idea about what the primary key is. There can be multiple candidate keys which can become primary. So for example, if I'm having one more column in my table, suppose say as email ID, then we are aware that every person is having a unique email ID. There won't be two people who are having the same email address, right? So in this case, email address can also become a candidate to be a primary key. So you will be having, two keys. First is nothing but the ID, and the another one is nothing but your email address, and both these fields are having that particular quality to be a kind of primary key for you. So in this case, you have to check that which particular value or which particular key you want to consider as a primary, but candidate will be both the keys. That is nothing but your ID will also be the candidate key, and the another one, that is nothing but your email address, will also be the candidate key to become a primary key. Now let us try to understand what do we mean by foreign key. So in order to create the foreign key, we have to write something like this. So we are creating one more table. I'm creating a table called as the order, wherein I'm deciding order ID as integer not null, order number as integer not null, person ID as integer, and in this case, the primary key for my given table order is going to be order ID, and I'm going to make person ID as a foreign key, wherein this person ID will be referred from the persons, that is nothing but the first table that we have created. And there are some naming issues, so let us just try to rectify them. I'll rewrite this. So we can create table, suppose say orders. In this case, we are creating this OID as integer. If you want to create not null, then you can write. Otherwise, it's okay not to write as not null. I will create one more variable. I will call it as simply ID, which is again integer. In this case, I will say that primary key I want to assign as order ID. This is my primary key. And I will keep foreign key as nothing but my ID. So this ID I'm going to reference from my first table, that is nothing but from my person table, and in person table that field is ID itself. So this is basically how you can write it, and you have to complete create tables column. So that is completed like this. Just hope you got how we have written the query. So if you run this, it will generate that query is okay, 0 rows affected. I repeat it one more time. We have already created a table person. We are creating the table order, in which we are having order ID integer, which is a primary key. So we have assigned it as a primary. ID integer, this is a foreign key, which is a primary key in a person, called over here as a foreign. So we are saying that it's a foreign key ID which is referencing to the person table, and again the ID column of the person table. So this is basically how we have created. Now we have to insert the values into orders table. So we are inserting into orders, we are writing the values. So the first value first order, I would like to assign it as 1, which is associated with the person 101. I'll write that insert into order values 2, that is order ID 2, associated with the person 102, that is nothing but the one having the name as Ram. I'll create order ID 3 with person 103, that is nothing but for that Alex that we have created. I'll create this ID 4 for the person 104. When you run this, it will generate an error because there is no reference 104 found in the person table, because in the person table we have the values only up till 103, and that's why when you say that the order ID 4 should be matched with the person ID 104, so that is not allowed because you don't have the information related to this 104. So if you want to check, you can run select star from person. So these are the values in the person, and if you run select star from orders, so this is how it would look like. So when you are saying that I want to assign ID OID4 for the ID 104, but 104 is not present in your person table, that's why it will generate an error for your foreign key constraint. So this is basically how you can use your foreign key in order to match the table values. So whenever you are having two or multiple tables and when you want to combine the information, like here I wanted to combine my person information and order information, which is possible for the matching kind of entries of the ID. But if your entries are not matching, then in that case it is bound to generate an error for the foreign key constraint. So this is basically how you can use the primary key and foreign key, and this is basically how you can maintain the constraints of the primary key and foreign key. So I just hope you understood how to implement the primary key and foreign key concept. So there are two more constraints that we are supposed to complete. We'll see that in the next session. Till the time, thank you so much for patiently listening to this session. Have a nice day ahead.